Hello and welcome back to Cultural Geography. As I said in the previous lecture, I'll be making these video lectures to accompany the chapters in your textbook, The Cultural Landscape. The videos will highlight some of the key points in the chapter, but not all of them. It is your responsibility for covering the material in the textbook, as you will be quizzed on this as well. So on that note, let's get into it. Space and place are concepts that we've learned at a very young age, yet we don't think about them in depth very often. However, being a geographer, it's our job to think about these things. Space and place are the two domains in which we live, work, and function. The distinction between the two are important because we approach life in each one a little bit differently. So perhaps a simple way of conceptualizing space, according to Town, is that space can be described as a location which has no social connections for human beings. No value has been added to this space. Place is, in contrary, more than just a location, for example, a toponym, a site, situation, or some kind of mathematical location. And it can be described as a location created by human experiences. The size of this location does not matter, and it's unlimited. It can be a city, a neighborhood, a region, a classroom, or your bedroom. In fact, place exists of space that is filled with meaning and objectives by human experiences in this particular space. Since place is given meaning by human experience, a place can have a very different meaning from person to person. For example, the Nampa CWI campus might be a place where you met your first girlfriend, made a best friend, got in a car wreck in the parking lot, developed a mentorship with an instructor, etc. For me, CWI's sense of place is represented by my place of work and interactions between my students and colleagues. What this means is that your sense of place at CWI will be different than mine or someone else's. Another example of this could be Bogus Basin Ski Resort. This sense of place might be defined by you as a place where you first learned to ski as a child, or broke your leg, or had the best tasting hot chocolate. These experiences define Bogus Basin's sense of place for you, but can vary for other people. So Yi Fu Tuan employed this term topophilia as a strong sense of place which often becomes mixed with a sense of cultural identity among certain people and a love of certain aspects of such a place. So topophilia is an affection for a place, strong religious or familial ties to a place, or personal identity and or a collective memory tied to a place. So for example, the stickers of Idaho and I Love New York stickers is a form or an expression of topophilia, somebody's real strong connection to Idaho or New York. Many other examples of this, but these are kind of probably two ones that are pretty common, especially the Idaho that you see on stickers on people's cars. So the concept of connections, or this interconnection, emphasizes that no object of geographical study can be viewed in isolation. So interconnection refers to the linking of places, environments, and spatial patterns, either by tangible links such as roads, railroads, or by intangible links such as political, economic systems, or electronic systems. People and organizations and places are interconnected with other places in a variety of ways. These interconnections have significant influences on the characteristics of places and on changes in these characteristics. So here Facebook is an example of much of the world being interconnected by social networks. This information is flowing across space to places such as your work, home, smartphones, etc. And we'll talk about Facebook later on. Starbucks coffee is another example of these connections, where we can have these beam sources could be from multiple places across the globe. Same with paper sources for the cup, or sugar all comes together from these various portions of the world to make this cup of coffee. These are all connections. So the distance decay effect states that the interactions between two locales declines as the distance between them increases. Once the distance is outside of these two locales' activity space, their interactions begin to decrease. And these locales of these activity spaces can definitely vary in size. In essence, distance decay describes how things like communication and infrastructure break down relative to distance from a cultural center. So this leads to cultural differences between urban centers and its outskirts, or between two distant neighboring settlements. So here is an example of the simplest way of thinking about distance decay is pertaining to human culture is like this. Pretend you have three different ethnic groups called A, B, and C. Group A and B live relatively close to each other along a river that follows easily trade and travel. Group C lives further from Group B and even further from Group A. As a result, Group A and B will come into contact with each other frequently. Groups B and C will come into contact with each other occasionally, and Group A and C will come into contact with each other only rarely. This can have far-reaching implications when it comes to the history of these two groups. Group A and B might begin to develop common customs and dialects, while Group C will diverge widely and remain linguistically distinct. The further these groups are from each other, the less frequent their interactions become. So distance decay does not just happen to ethnic groups, though. It also very easily observed in any city, in any country, anywhere in the world. In the greater city, in the center of the city, there are likely to be more businesses, better public transit, better sanitation services, and better quality roads. As you move further from the city center, these services begin to break down. So businesses give way to residential areas, public transit runs less frequently, septic tanks and wells replace sewage systems and municipal water, and roads aren't well maintained. The further you move away from these urban areas, the more evidence this decay becomes. Eventually, the very outskirts of an area may only have a few small businesses, no transit system, rudimentary sanitation, and dirt roads. Property tends to be cheaper the further you move away from the urban area, and buildings tend to get smaller as well. So here is an example that we can see that is the distance from a convenience store, a grocery store, and a superstore increases from the customer. So here on the bottom axis we have distance, and on the vertical axis we have customers. So think about this in your life. You are probably only willing to drive a short distance to reach a convenience store like Jackson's or 7-Eleven, but you would drive much further to a Walmart or Costco. So this concept is referred to as friction of distance, which is related to distance decay. So the concept of friction of distance is based on the notion that distance usually requires some amount of effort, energy, and or money to overcome. Because of this friction, spatial interactions, especially transport, in the particular case human migration, will tend to take place more often over short distances. Amount and intensity of interaction will decay with distance. So even though no physical friction is involved, price and effort are metaphorically assumed to correspond to the forces counteracting transport movements. So the first law of geography was developed by Waldo Tobler in 1970, and it makes the observation that everything is related to everything else, but nearer things are more related than distant things. So here is a good example of this law. This map is a portion of New York showing one dot per person, color-coded by race. So white signifies, or the blue dot signifies white people, the green black, red Asian, orange Hispanic, and the brown is all other races. As you can see, if you are black, you are more likely to have neighbors that are black as well, which can be said for all the other races too. We seem to cluster together. So here's another example looking at teenage birth rates by state, where the darker the color, the higher the birth rate. From this map, Mississippi has the highest teen birth rate, and following Tobler's law, states that are near Mississippi have the highest teen birth rate, and states furthest away have some of the lowest teen birth rates. So if Tobler's law weren't true, you would have complete randomness, which would make life impossible. Think about this from a cultural perspective, if everything was just completely random. Or even from a physical geography perspective, if everything was completely random as you're walking across the physical landscape. It would be quite different. It wouldn't be practical. You couldn't make any kind of spatial patterns or any kind of logic out of it. So the next concept here is space-time compression. Space-time compression is the increasing sense of connectivity that seems to be bringing people closer together even though their distances are the same. Space-time compression is the solution to distance decay because technology, internet, cell phones, travel, for example, airplanes, cars, rails, and economics, the need to overcome spatial barriers, open up new markets, speed up production cycles, and reduce the turnover time of capital, is allowing us to communicate more across longer distances. A mobile phone is a time compression device because it compresses the social communication of the caller to the callee. It is a box that transcends space and time to connect users across great distances with minimal lag time. The cell phone is the most compressed real-time form of techno-social existence. Also, the internet also has an influence in time-space compression. I'm able to communicate with friends in Spain via Facebook. Without Facebook, my interaction with these people would be very limited. Having friends in Colorado and keeping up with their lives is easy with technology in ways that could not have been done just 10 or even 15 years ago. Today, it's easy for me to get on an airplane and go visit them. Space-time compression. 100 years ago, I probably wouldn't have friends in Colorado or Spain because of the geographic barriers. 100 years ago, I would not hop on my horse or get in my buggy and go visit friends in Colorado. Today, that's very easy. Time-space compression. When was the last time you wrote a letter to a friend or family member and sent it in the mail? Snail mail. Technology has closed this gap. This is another example of space-time compression.